How does an abandoned child, left for dead on the harsh, desolate steppes, rise from utter despair to forge the largest contiguous empire the world has ever known, changing the very course of human history? Tonight, let the quiet whisper of the winds carry you into the astonishing saga of Genghis Khan. Before we begin, though, please be sure to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, be sure to comment down below where you are tuning in from and what time it is. It's always interesting to hear of the whereabouts of our viewers. Now, let's begin. Our story begins not in a gilded palace or a bustling city, but on the vast, unforgiving steppes of Mongolia, a land where survival was a daily battle against harsh nature and rival tribes. Imagine a world of nomadic horsemen, where loyalty was fluid, violence a constant companion, and the winds carried the whispers of ancient feuds and fleeting alliances. It is into this crucible of hardship, around the year 1162 AD, that a boy named Temujin was born. His name, believed to mean of iron, or blacksmith, perhaps foreshadowed the unyielding will that would define his life. He was born clutching a blood clot in his tiny fist, a sign, so legend would have it, that he was destined for greatness, for blood, and for leadership. His early life, however, was anything but great. Temujin was the son of Yesuge, a respected chieftain of the Borjigin clan, a man who had forged some alliances and even captured enemies. For a brief period, Temujin knew the relative security of a chieftain's son, albeit one always on guard. He was betrothed at a young age to Borte, a girl from the influential Ongarat tribe, a strategic marriage designed to cement alliances. But just as his childhood was beginning to take shape, disaster struck with brutal swiftness. When Temujin was around 9 years old, his father, Yesuge, was poisoned by rival Tatars, an act of vengeful retribution. This was a common, brutal end for a steppe warrior. With the death of Yesuge, Temujin's world disintegrated. The alliances his father had painstakingly built dissolved. The very people who had once followed Yesuge, fearing that Temujin, a mere child, could not lead them against their powerful enemies, abandoned his family. Imagine the crushing blow. A young boy, suddenly orphaned, cast out onto the vast, indifferent steppe with his mother, Holan, and his younger siblings. They were utterly destitute, stripped of their tents, their livestock, their social standing, reduced to the status of outcasts, lower than the lowest. The years that followed were a grim testament to the harsh realities of steppe life and the indomitable spirit of Holan. She, a formidable woman in her own right, scraped by to keep her children alive,
foraging for roots, fishing in meager streams, and hunting rodents. Temujin, even as a child, learned to hunt, to survive, to endure cold, hunger, and relentless insecurity. This period of extreme poverty and abandonment was not just physically grueling, it was deeply formative. It instilled in Temujin a profound understanding of loyalty and betrayal, a deep distrust of shifting alliances, and an unshakable determination to never again be vulnerable or abandoned. He also learned the hard lessons of the steppe, self-reliance, cunning, and ruthless pragmatism. One particular incident from this period, recorded in the Secret History of the Mongols, paints a stark picture of the brutal environment that forged him. Temujin, along with his full brother Khasar, got into a dispute with their elder half-brother, Begta, over a small fish caught while foraging. In a fit of rage, or perhaps a chilling act of cold, calculated dominance, Temujin and Khasar killed Begta. This act of fratricide, shocking even by steppe standards, underscored a nascent ruthlessness within Temujin, a willingness to eliminate any threat, even from within his own family, to ensure his family's and ultimately his own survival and authority. The hardships continued. At one point, the Taikyud clan, who had been responsible for abandoning his family after his father's death, captured Temujin and enslaved him.
He was held captive, reportedly in a wooden stock, a kangu, a humiliating and dangerous position. But Temujin, even in captivity, demonstrated his cunning and resilience. With the help of a sympathetic tribesman, he managed a daring escape under the cover of darkness. This experience of enslavement and his triumphant escape further solidified his resolve. He would never again be subject to the will of others, and he would seek vengeance against those who had wronged him. Released and now a young man, Temujin immediately sought out Borte, his childhood betrothed. Despite the years of hardship, she had waited for him, a testament to the bonds that formed in that harsh world. Their marriage, solidified by her dowry of a fine sable fur coat, was not just personal. It was a critical political alliance. This coat, a valuable asset, allowed Temujin to approach Ong Khan of the powerful Karaid clan. Ong Khan, a former ally of Yesuge, reluctantly accepted Temujin as a foster son, providing a much-needed, albeit tenuous layer of protection and influence for the young, still struggling leader. But peace on the steppe was always fleeting. A rival tribe, the Merkid, who had a long-standing feud with Temujin's mother's clan, decided to avenge an old slight by kidnapping Borte. This act of profound personal violation ignited a burning fury within Temujin. He rallied his meager forces, appealed to Ong Khan and his powerful Karaid army, and, crucially, sought help from his childhood blood brother Jamuka.
Jamuka was a charismatic leader in his own right, and their early bond of Anda, blood brotherhood, was deep, based on shared adventures and mutual respect. With the combined might of these allies, Temujin raided the Merkids, brutally looting their camp and successfully reclaiming Borte. This early victory not only restored his honor, but also gained him respect and followers, showcasing his growing leadership abilities and his ferocity. Borge's first son, Yoki, was born 9 months after her return, a son whose paternity would always be a subtle point of contention, but whom Temujin always acknowledged as his own. The alliance with Jamuka, however, was destined to sour. As Temujin's influence grew, his leadership style began to diverge from Jamuka's. Jamuka embodied the traditional steppe nomadic leadership, valuing personal charisma and tribal autonomy. Temujin, however, was a revolutionary. He began to implement radical, meritocratic policies that challenged the old tribal system. He forbade the arbitrary looting of his enemies without permission, and crucially, he implemented a policy of sharing the spoils of war, gold, silver, livestock, valuable goods, equitably among his warriors and their families, even the lowliest soldiers, instead of reserving it all for the aristocratic elite. This wasn't just generosity, it was strategic brilliance. By ensuring that his troops and their families directly shared in the riches of conquest, Temujin cultivated a fiercely loyal army and a population that was as invested in the empire's success as he was. This policy gained him a broader range of followers, attracting those from impoverished or lower-class backgrounds who saw an opportunity to rise based on skill and bravery, not just birthright. The clash was inevitable. The burgeoning rivalry between Temujin and Jamuka, once blood brothers, erupted into open conflict. Jamuka, adhering to older customs, eventually attacked Ong Khan and Temujin. Despite suffering an arrow shot to the neck in battle, Temujin rallied his forces, defeated Jamuka, and importantly, began to assimilate his defeated opponents and their people, rather than simply looting them and leaving them to scatter, as was the usual steppe custom. He offered former enemies a chance to join his growing ranks, providing them with purpose and a share in his burgeoning success. This policy of incorporation rather than just destruction proved immensely powerful. The unification of the Mongols was a bloody, brutal process that lasted for years. Temujin systematically defeated the remaining powerful rival tribes, the Tatars, who had poisoned his father, bringing a satisfying revenge, the Karaid, his former patrons under Ong Khan, who had turned treacherous, and finally, the powerful Naiman clan.
He employed a combination of military might, shrewd political manipulation, and relentless determination. He cultivated an elite kashik, a highly disciplined imperial guard loyal directly to him. replacing tribal loyalties with personal allegiance to the leader. By 1206 AD, after decades of struggle, betrayal, and relentless warfare, Temujin had accomplished the unimaginable. He had overcome crushing poverty, survived enslavement, avenged his family, and most profoundly, he had unified all the disparate warring nomadic tribes of the Mongolian plateau under a single banner. This achievement, unprecedented in Mongol history, transformed a collection of squabbling clans into a formidable, cohesive nation. In a grand assembly, a Kurultai tribal council held on the sacred plains, the Mongol chieftains formally recognized his supremacy. It was there that Temujin was bestowed with the momentous title, Genghis Khan. This title, often translated as universal ruler or oceanic ruler, perfectly encapsulated his ambition and his perceived destiny. It marked not just the elevation of a man, but the birth of a unified Mongol nation, now poised to look beyond the vast, familiar steppes. The stage was set for a whirlwind of conquest that would reshape the map of the world and leave an indelible mark on human history. The outcast orphan had become the universal ruler, and his empire was about to begin its astonishing expansion. The year 1206 AD marked an epochal moment on the windswept steppes. Temujin, the orphaned outcast who had defied every expectation, was proclaimed Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. This was no mere title. It was a profound statement of intent, a vision for a unified Mongol nation that would reshape the very fabric of the world. With the tribal feuds finally silenced and the Mongol nation forged into a cohesive, disciplined force, Genghis Khan immediately turned his prodigious organizational genius to solidifying his power and preparing his newly unified people for expansion. His first and most crucial act after 1206 was to establish a universal legal code, the Yasa, or sometimes called the Yasa or Yasak. This wasn't just a collection of laws. It was a comprehensive moral and legal framework that bound all Mongols together, superseding ancient tribal customs and personal loyalties. The Yasa emphasized absolute discipline, unwavering loyalty to the Khan, and a strict system of justice within the empire. It outlawed intertribal warfare, prohibited theft of livestock, a grave offense in nomadic society, forbade the selling or kidnapping of women, and even regulated hunting seasons to ensure sustainability. Crucially, it promoted meritocracy. Positions in the military and administration were no longer inherited, but earned through skill, courage, and loyalty to the Khan, a revolutionary concept for the time. This legal foundation transformed a volatile confederation of clans into an integrated, efficient political and military entity. To ensure rapid communication and intelligence gathering across his burgeoning domain, Genghis Khan established the Yam, a highly efficient postal relay system. Imagine a vast network of hundreds, perhaps thousands of well-stocked relay stations spread across the steppe, each with fresh horses and riders ready to carry messages at lightning speed. This allowed Genghis Khan to send orders, receive intelligence, and coordinate armies across distances that would have crippled any other empire of the age. It was a vital nervous system for his military machine and a precursor to modern postal services, far more advanced than anything seen in the West at that time. But the true engine of the Mongol Empire's unprecedented expansion was its military machine. Genghis Khan meticulously organized his warriors, discarding the old, unreliable tribal structures based on kin and replacing them with a strict decimal system. Every man between the ages of 15 and 70 was conscripted. Units were organized into squads of 10, an arban, then hundreds, jahun, thousands, mingan, and ultimately divisions of 10,000, 2 men. Each unit was commanded by officers whose loyalty was directly to Genghis Khan, often chosen for their competence rather than their noble birth. This hierarchical structure afforded the Mongol army enormous flexibility, adaptability, and cohesion. Soldiers were trained to fight as a single, disciplined unit, moving with fluid precision that astounded their enemies.
Harsh punishments for desertion or disobeying orders ensured absolute obedience. The heart of the Mongol army was its cavalry. Mongol warriors were born and raised on horseback, seemingly fused with their mounts. They possessed unparalleled expertise in horsemanship, capable of riding for days on end with minimal rest, living off fermented mare's milk and dried meat, and even sleeping in the saddle. Each soldier typically brought 3 or 4 horses, allowing them to switch mounts frequently, maintain relentless speed, and avoid wearing out their animals. This gave them incredible speed and mobility, capable of covering 80 to 120 kilometers, 50 to 75 miles per day, far outstripping any conventional army of the time. Their primary weapon was the Mongol composite bow, a technological marvel crafted from horn, wood, and sinew, capable of tremendous power. These bows could pierce armor at long ranges, up to 200 to 300 meters, and, crucially, could be fired with deadly accuracy while mounted at a full gallop, even backwards, the Parthian shot. This combination of firepower and maneuverability was devastating. They also carried lances, swords, and small shields for close-quarters combat.
Their use of light cavalry, fast horse archers, and heavy cavalry, armored lancers, allowed for versatile tactics. Beyond their inherent martial skill, Mongol military strategy was characterized by its sophistication and ruthlessness. They excelled at hit-and-run tactics, relentless barrages of arrows, and devastating ambushes. Their signature move was the feigned retreat. Mongol units would pretend to be defeated and flee in disarray, luring pursuing enemy forces into breaking their formations and stretching their lines. Once the enemy was dispersed and vulnerable, the Mongols would suddenly turn, often revealing hidden reserves, and launch a devastating counterattack, encircling and annihilating their disorganized opponents. This tactic worked repeatedly against more conventional armies. Intelligence and reconnaissance were paramount. Genghis Khan maintained extensive spy networks that gathered information about enemy movements, strengths, weaknesses, and even internal political divisions. Excellent scouting, often by fast, light horsemen, provided real-time battlefield intelligence, allowing Mongol commanders to make informed decisions and launch surprise attacks with precision. Perhaps most chillingly, the Mongols mastered psychological warfare. They deliberately cultivated a terrifying reputation for brutality and overwhelming force. Cities that resisted were often utterly annihilated, their populations massacred, their buildings razed, leaving piles of skulls as a warning. This created a climate of fear that often preceded them, causing many cities and armies to surrender without a fight rather than face the Mongols' wrath. They would also use human shields, forcing prisoners captured in previous battles to march at the front of their lines during sieges, forcing defenders to kill their own countrymen. Finally, their adaptability was key. While initially weak at siege warfare, attacking walled cities, they quickly learned. They would capture engineers from China or Persia, incorporate them into their army, and force them to build sophisticated siege engines like catapults, trebuchets, and even giant crossbows. They also mastered techniques like diverting rivers, tunneling under walls, and launching flaming projectiles or even diseased bodies over fortifications, effectively turning sieges into exercises in attrition and terror. The Mongols were not just warriors, they were learners. With this formidable machine, Genghis Khan began his campaigns of conquest. His first major external target was the Western Shah, Tangut Empire, a powerful Buddhist kingdom in northwestern China. The Mongols launched initial raids in 1207, testing their new unified army. Genghis Khan's motivations were complex. Economic resources, the Western Shah controlled vital trade routes, revenge for past slights, and, crucially, a strategic move to secure his western flank and provide a gateway to the richer Jin dynasty to the south. The campaigns forced the Western Shia to submit and become Mongol vassals, providing tribute and military aid. This early victory proved the effectiveness of his new military system. Next, Genghis Khan set his sights on the mighty Jin dynasty, northern China, a
a powerful and wealthy Jurchen-led empire that controlled vast swathes of northern China. The Jin ruler had made the fatal mistake of demanding Genghis Khan's submission, an insult the universal ruler could not tolerate. The invasion began in 1211 AD. The Mongols, though often outnumbered, consistently outmaneuvered and outfought the more static Jin armies. Genghis Khan learned quickly from initial setbacks against fortified Chinese cities. He besieged and eventually captured Zhongdu, modern-day Beijing, the Jin capital, in 1215 AD. The fall of Zhongdu was brutal, marked by extensive looting and destruction. This campaign was a crucial learning experience for the Mongols, forcing them to adapt their nomadic warfare to the challenges of siegecraft against fortified urban centers, a skill they rapidly mastered by incorporating captured engineers and Chinese siege techniques. Just as the Mongols were consolidating their hold on northern China, an event far to the west sparked an even greater, more devastating conflict. Genghis Khan had initially sought peaceful trade relations with the Khwarezmian Empire, a vast and wealthy Islamic empire stretching across Central Asia and Persia. He sent a large trade caravan, accompanied by Mongol ambassadors, to establish relations. However, the Khwarezmian governor of Otrar, perhaps out of greed or misjudgment, seized the caravan's goods and executed the merchants. Even worse, when Genghis Khan sent a second diplomatic party to demand accountability, the arrogant Shah Muhammad II of Khwarezm murdered the Mongol ambassadors and sent their heads back to Genghis Khan. This act of profound disrespect and violation of diplomatic immunity ignited a burning fury in Genghis Khan. He viewed it not just as an insult, but as a direct challenge to his universal authority. In 1219 AD, he personally led a massive Mongol army, estimated at around 200,000 highly disciplined troops, westward in an unprecedented campaign against the Khwarezmian Empire. The invasion was swift, brutal, and devastating beyond measure. Major cities like Bukhara, Samarkand, Urgench, and Merv, once glittering jewels of Islamic civilization, fell rapidly and were utterly annihilated. The Mongols perfected their siege tactics, often diverting rivers to flood cities or cutting off water supplies, then ruthlessly massacring populations who resisted. Skilled artisans, scholars, and engineers were often spared and relocated to Mongolia or other parts of the empire, but resistance meant complete destruction. The level of slaughter was unimaginable, creating a lasting legacy of terror and despair that spread far beyond the immediate battlefield.
This campaign shattered the heart of the Islamic world, leaving a vast trail of desolation across Central Asia and Persia. While Genghis Khan himself focused on the Khwarezmian Empire, he dispatched two of his finest generals, Jabi and Subutai, on an epic reconnaissance-in-force expedition to the west in 1221-1223 AD. This incredible journey took them through Azerbaijan, into Georgia, over the Caucasus Mountains, and onto the vast Russian steppes. They methodically defeated local forces, including the Georgians and the Alans. Their most famous victory came at the Battle of the Kalka River in 1223 AD, where they decisively defeated a much larger combined army of Rus, early Russian principalities, and Cuman, Kipchak forces. The Mongols employed their signature feigned retreat tactics, luring the Rus into a prolonged pursuit that exhausted and fragmented their army, then turned and annihilated them. This campaign showcased the Mongols' tactical superiority, their remarkable mobility, and provided crucial intelligence on the lands to the far west, mapping out future conquests. After this astonishing expedition, Jabi and Subutai triumphantly returned to Mongolia, having scouted vast new territories, confirming that no one could stand against them. Genghis Khan spent his later years consolidating his empire and leading one final campaign. After his return from the Khwarezmian campaign around 1225, he focused on the Western Shah kingdom once more. This kingdom, which had been a reluctant Mongol vassal, had defied him by refusing to send troops for the Khwarezmian campaign and had allegedly harbored Mongol enemies. Genghis Khan's death came in 1227 AD, during this final campaign against the Western Shah. The exact circumstances of his death remain shrouded in mystery and legend, deliberately kept secret by the Mongols themselves to protect his spiritual power and prevent enemy celebration. Various accounts exist. Some sources suggest he died from injuries sustained after a fall from his horse during a hunting accident. Others claim he succumbed to a battle wound. Another theory suggests he died from illness, possibly typhoid fever, which was rampant during military campaigns. A particularly gruesome, though less historically substantiated, legend claims he was castrated and bled to death by a Western Shah princess in revenge. Regardless of the precise cause, Genghis Khan died in the field, campaigning just as he had lived. His final orders were ruthless: ensure the complete annihilation of the Western Shah capital and its royal family for their defiance. The extreme secrecy surrounding his burial is legendary and persists to this day. Genghis Khan had reportedly expressed a wish to be buried without any markings or signs in a secret, undisturbed location.
According to common Mongol tradition, his body was returned to present-day Mongolia, likely to a sacred place near his presumed birthplace and the holy mountain of Burkhan Khaldun in the Khenti Mountains. Legend claims that the soldiers who escorted his body and attended his funeral procession killed anyone they encountered along the route to keep the burial location secret. Furthermore, the land over his grave was reportedly trampled by thousands of horses to obliterate any trace, and some legends even suggest a river was diverted over the burial site to make it impossible to find, echoing ancient myths. His tomb remains one of history's greatest undiscovered secrets, a testament to Mongol burial customs and his deliberate wish for an unmarked grave, allowing his spirit to roam freely and protect his nation. Before his death, Genghis Khan meticulously planned the division of his empire among his sons, establishing the Ulus system. While the ultimate authority of the great Khan, the Khagan, was recognized, each son was granted a specific territory to govern as their patrimony. This system was designed to maintain unity while managing the vast empire, though it would eventually lead to internal power struggles and fragmentation. Genghis Khan's reign ended with him having conquered more contiguous land than any other single individual in history. He left behind not just a massive empire, but a meticulously organized military, a foundational legal code, and an administrative system that would continue to expand under his descendants. He was a military genius of unparalleled skill, a brutal conqueror who inspired terror, but also a visionary leader who fostered loyalty and transformed a fragmented collection of nomadic tribes into a unified, disciplined, and utterly unstoppable force. The foundation was laid, and the Mongol storm was far from over. With Genghis Khan's death in 1227 AD, the vast empire he had forged faced its first true test of succession. The Ulus system he had put in place, dividing his empire among his sons, was designed to manage this. After a Kurultai, Grand Tribal Council, in 1229, Genghis Khan's third son, Ogedei Khan, was chosen as the Great Khan. Ogedei, a jovial and generous leader, proved to be a highly capable administrator who embraced his father's vision for continued expansion and empire building. Under his steady hand, the Mongol conquests didn't merely continue, they escalated, pushing the boundaries of the empire to astonishing new limits. Ogedei immediately focused on consolidating and expanding the empire, particularly in China. His father had initiated campaigns against the Jin dynasty in northern China, but it was Ogedei who would deliver the final blow.
After relentless campaigns, including the long and brutal siege and fall of Kaifeng in 1233, the Jin dynasty was utterly destroyed in 1234. This marked a monumental achievement, completing the conquest of northern China and bringing vast new populations and resources under Mongol control. Further east, Mongol forces also expanded into Korea, eventually forcing the Korean kingdom to submit and become a Mongol vassal, providing tribute and military assistance. But the most dramatic and far-reaching expansion under Ögedei's reign was the massive Western campaign, a full-scale invasion of Europe led by Genghis Khan's formidable grandson Batu Khan and the brilliant, seasoned general Subutai. This was no mere raid. It was a carefully planned, multi-pronged invasion designed to conquer the lands that Subutai had previously scouted during his epic reconnaissance ride years earlier. The Mongol army, numbering perhaps 150,000 highly disciplined troops, was divided into several forces, striking with terrifying precision. Their initial target was Kievan Rus, modern-day Ukraine and Russia, a collection of fragmented principalities. The Mongols struck with astonishing speed and ferocity, unleashing a campaign of brutal destruction. City after city fell: Ryazan, Kolomna, Vladimir, Suzdal, and finally, in December 1240, Kiev itself, the ancient capital of Rus. The sack of Kiev was particularly devastating, virtually leveling the city and massacring its inhabitants. The Mongol conquests imposed a period known as the Mongol Yoke on the Russian principalities, a period of heavy tribute, taxation, and political subjugation that would last for over 2 centuries, profoundly shaping Russian history and its future development. Many principalities were left shattered, effectively becoming vassals of the emerging Golden Horde. From Rus, the Mongol invasion turned its terrifying momentum towards Central Europe, plunging into Poland, Hungary, and launching raids into Bohemia and even the lands of the Teutonic Knights. The year 1241 AD saw 2 pivotal battles that sent shivers of dread throughout Europe. At the Battle of Legnica in Poland, a smaller Mongol force decisively defeated a combined army of Poles, Germans, and Teutonic Knights, led by Duke Henry II the Pious. The Mongols used their characteristic feigned retreats and encirclement tactics, utterly annihilating the European forces. Just 2 days later, at the Battle of Mohi in Hungary, the main Mongol army under Batu and Subutai inflicted an even more devastating defeat on the forces of King Bela IV of Hungary. The Hungarians, caught by surprise and unable to adapt to Mongol tactics, suffered catastrophic losses. These were crushing victories, opening the path for the Mongols to sweep further into Europe. It seemed as though nothing could stop them. Panic spread across the continent. European rulers and populations feared the complete conquest of their lands, bracing for further onslaughts. However, in the midst of this terrifying advance, a truly crucial turning point occurred. In December 1241, Ögedei Khan died back in Mongolia. According to deeply ingrained Mongol tradition, all the Mongol princes and leading generals, including Batu and Subutai, had to immediately return to the Mongol heartland for a Kurultai, a grand council, to elect a new great Khan. This abrupt recall fundamentally altered the course of European history. The Mongol invasion of Europe, just as it seemed poised to engulf the continent, simply halted. While later Mongol raids would occur, the vast, coordinated campaign of conquest never resumed with the same intensity. This withdrawal, though devastating to the lands already ravaged, effectively saved Western Europe from complete Mongol conquest, allowing its nascent states to recover and develop. It left a lasting psychological impact, fostering a renewed sense of European identity and spurring the development of stronger centralized states and militaries. Despite the abrupt end to the European campaign, the period under Ögedei and his successors would become known as the Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace. This was an era of relative peace and stability across the vast, unified Mongol Empire, spanning Eurasia. While born from brutal conquest, this peace facilitated an unprecedented level of interaction and exchange across the continent. At the heart of the Pax Mongolica's transformative power was the revitalization and security of the Silk Road. For centuries, this ancient network of trade routes had linked East and West, but it was often dangerous, fragmented by warring states and plagued by bandits. The Mongols, by conquering the vast expanse of Eurasia and bringing it under a single, unified authority, effectively cleared and protected these routes, They ruthlessly suppressed bandits, removed numerous local tariffs and tolls that had previously stifled trade, and maintained the efficient postal relay system that ensured safe passage and rapid communication. This deliberate policy fostered unprecedented movement of goods, people, and, crucially, information and ideas between China, Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. This era saw a tremendous exchange of goods. From the east flowed luxurious silks, exotic spices, tea, invaluable porcelain, and fascinating inventions like paper money and the magnetic compass. From the west came furs, gold, silver, textiles, and other commodities. But far more significant was the transfer of technologies and ideas, what historians now call the Mongol Exchange. Chinese inventions flowed westward, profoundly impacting Europe's development. Gunpowder, a Chinese invention, spread rapidly across the Mongol Empire to the Islamic world and then to Europe, revolutionizing warfare and ultimately undermining the age of feudal castles. Printing technology, including block printing and perhaps even movable type, traveled west, laying groundwork for the Gutenberg press and the later information revolution. The widespread use of paper money, though it caused economic issues for the Mongols, influenced early European banking practices. The compass, essential for navigation, also became more widely known in Europe. Advanced medical knowledge from China, including diagnosis techniques and pharmacology, along with new agricultural practices and crops like carrots, buckwheat, and lemons, diffused across continents. From the Middle East, advancements in astronomy, mathematics, including Arabic numerals, algebra, and trigonometry, medicine, engineering, and cartography spread eastward into China and westward into Europe. The Mongols were pragmatic. If something worked, they adopted it, regardless of its origin. This period also saw new crops and culinary traditions spread across Eurasia, enriching diets and agricultural practices. Crucially, the Mongols, under Genghis Khan's Yasa, generally maintained a policy of remarkable religious tolerance. They were animists and shamanists themselves, but they largely refrained from imposing their own beliefs on conquered peoples. Instead, they allowed diverse religions, Buddhism, Nestorian Christianity, Islam, Confucianism, to flourish under Mongol rule. This policy was pragmatic. It helped avoid unnecessary rebellions and attracted scholars, artisans, and religious figures of various backgrounds to the Mongol courts, fostering intellectual and spiritual exchange. For instance, Karakorum, the Mongol imperial capital, housed Buddhist temples, Christian churches, and Muslim mosques side by side, a testament to its cosmopolitan nature. This Pax Mongolica also greatly facilitated diplomatic missions and travel. European envoys, like the Franciscan friars Giovanni da Pian del Carpin and William of Rubruck, journeyed deep into the Mongol heartland to the Great Khan's court, bringing back invaluable, though often alarming, information about the vast empire. Later, the most famous traveler of all, the Venetian merchant Marco Polo, undertook his epic journey to China in the late 13th century, spending years in the court of Kublai Khan. His detailed accounts, though initially met with skepticism, would later inspire European explorers for centuries, including Christopher Columbus. The impact of the Pax Mongolica, though born from astonishing violence, created a truly interconnected world for the first time, laying the groundwork for many of the global exchanges that would characterize later centuries.
The astonishing era of the Pax Mongolica, a period of unprecedented connectivity across Eurasia, was established and maintained by a singular, overarching authority embodied in the Great Khan. But the sheer scale of the empire, the immense distances, and the differing aspirations of Genghis Khan's many descendants created inherent tensions that would eventually lead to its fragmentation. The seeds of this division were sown in the intricate system of succession Genghis Khan had established, the Ulu system, granting territories to his sons as patrimonies. While the idea was to create a unified but managed empire, in practice it often led to fierce rivalries. The tipping point came with the death of Mongke Khan in 1259 AD. Mongke, a grandson of Genghis Khan, was a strong and capable great Khan
who had overseen the continuation of ambitious campaigns, notably against the southern Song dynasty in China and the massive push into the Middle East under his brother Hulegu. However, his sudden death while campaigning created a critical succession crisis. The traditional Kurultai, Grand Council, was supposed to elect the next great Khan, but two of Mongke's younger brothers, Kublai Khan and Arik Boke, each asserted their own claims to the supreme title. Kublai Khan, deeply involved in the Chinese campaigns, was proclaimed Great Khan by his own supporters in China, while Arik Boke, based in the Mongol heartland and championing more traditional nomadic values, was elected by another Kurultai of the conservative Mongol princes in Karakorum. This conflicting double election plunged the Mongol Empire into a devastating Toluid civil war, 1260-1264 AD, a brutal conflict between two powerful factions of the ruling house. This civil war, fought across vast distances, fundamentally and irrevocably weakened the unity and centralized authority of the Great Khanate. It was a family feud on a global scale, tearing at the very fabric of the empire Genghis Khan had so painstakingly woven together. Though Kublai Khan eventually emerged victorious, establishing his court in China, the civil war marked the decisive end of the unified Great Mongol Empire. The vast domains of Genghis Khan's heirs now formally splintered into four distinct, powerful, but increasingly independent khanates. While these khanates theoretically acknowledged a titular or spiritual headship of the Great Khan, Kublai and his successors in China, in reality, they pursued their own separate interests, developed distinct cultural and religious identities, and often clashed militarily with one another. These were the four great successor states: the Yuan dynasty in China, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, the Il Khanate in Persia and the Middle East, and the Golden Horde in Eastern Europe, Russia. Each would carve its own path, embodying a different facet of the Mongol legacy. Let's turn first to the most glittering of these successor states, the Yuan dynasty in China. This was Kublai Khan's 1260 to 1294 AD domain, and he, unlike his brother Arik Boke, fully embraced the idea of ruling as a Chinese emperor. Kublai was a visionary leader who understood that to effectively govern China, he needed to adopt Chinese customs and administrative practices, while still maintaining Mongol identity and supremacy. His greatest achievement was the final, decades-long conquest of the southern Song dynasty, a technologically advanced and culturally rich Chinese empire. This monumental feat, completed in 1279 AD, brought all of China under Mongol rule for the first time, ending centuries of Chinese division and creating a vast unified realm. Kublai established his grand new imperial capital at Khanbalik, meaning City of the Khan, the site of modern-day Beijing. He transformed it into a magnificent, meticulously planned metropolis, reflecting both Mongol power and Chinese grandeur. He adopted the Chinese dynastic name Yuan, meaning origin or beginning, effectively presenting himself as a legitimate successor to China's long line of emperors. He even adopted Chinese imperial rituals and administration, though he carefully maintained a distinct Mongol elite within the bureaucracy and military, keeping a careful separation between Mongols and Chinese. Under the Yuan dynasty, trade flourished like never before, benefiting from the Pax Mongolica's secured trade routes. Grand canals were built, the postal system was expanded, and paper money was widely used. This was the era that captivated Europe through the accounts of travelers like Marco Polo. Imagine the Venetian merchant arriving at Kublai's court, utterly awestruck by the imperial grandeur, the wealth, the sheer scale of the empire, and the advanced civilization he encountered in China. His detailed descriptions of Kublai Khan's lavish banquets, efficient administration, and vast power, though initially met with skepticism in Europe, would later inspire European explorers for centuries, including Christopher Columbus. However, Kublai Khan's reign also saw the limits of Mongol power. He famously launched two massive invasions of Japan in 1274 and 1281, attempting to conquer the island nation with enormous naval expeditions and hundreds of thousands of troops. Both attempts were thwarted by fierce Japanese resistance and, famously, by devastating typhoons, which the Japanese called kamikaze, divine winds, that destroyed much of the Mongol fleet. These failures marked a significant check on Mongol expansion. Despite its initial splendor, the Yuan dynasty eventually began to decline.
Internal rebellions, fueled by deep-seated Chinese resentment of foreign Mongol rule and heavy taxation, grew steadily. Natural disasters, such as successive devastating floods of the Yellow River and widespread famines, were seen as signs of the Mongols having lost the mandate of heaven. Economic woes, including hyperinflation of paper money and corruption within the bureaucracy, further destabilized the dynasty. Weakening leadership after Kublai's death allowed these issues to fester. Finally, in 1368 AD, a native Chinese peasant rebellion, led by Chu Yuanzhang, successfully overthrew the Yuan dynasty, establishing the Ming dynasty and expelling the Mongols from China. Meanwhile, in the vast plains of Eastern Europe and Russia lay the domain of the Golden Horde. Established by Batu Khan, another grandson of Genghis Khan, it was the northwesternmost successor state of the Mongol Empire. Its long-term impact on Russia was profound and controversial, often referred to as the Mongol yoke. For over 2 centuries, the Golden Horde imposed heavy tribute and taxation on the fragmented Russian principalities. While the Mongols generally allowed the Russian princes to maintain local governance and religious freedom, they demanded unwavering loyalty and imposed a strict system of taxation and military service. This period contributed to the political fragmentation of Russia, hindering its development compared to Western Europe, which was experiencing the Renaissance and Reformation. It also inadvertently fostered the development of Russian autocracy, as the princes of Moscow, acting as primary tax collectors for the Mongols, gradually consolidated power and learned the art of centralized, ruthless rule from their overlords, eventually using this power to overthrow the Mongols. The Mongol ruling elite of the Golden Horde gradually underwent a process of conversion to Islam, further distinguishing them from other Mongol khanates and influencing the religious landscape of the region. The Golden Horde was plagued by internal power struggles, assassinations, and eventual fragmentation into smaller, often warring khanates, like the Crimean Khanate and the Kazan Khanate, that continued to exist until the 18th century, long after the main horde had waned. To the southwest, in Persia and the Middle East, was the Ilkhanate, established by Hulagu Khan, yet another powerful grandson of Genghis Khan. This was the Khanate responsible for the infamous sack of Baghdad and the destruction of the Abbasid Caliphate. While the initial Mongol conquest brought widespread devastation, the Ilkhanate later saw a period of significant cultural and intellectual flourishing under Mongol patronage. Mongol rulers, often fascinated by scholarship and art, supported great observatories, fostered advancements in astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and sponsored the writing of grand histories and epic poetry. Persian scholars and artists, though under foreign rule, found opportunities to continue their work. Like the Golden Horde, the Mongol ruling elite of the Ilkhanate also underwent a gradual but profound conversion to Islam. Ghazan Khan, who reigned from 1295 to 1304, made Islam the official state religion of the Ilkhanate. This conversion led to greater integration with the Persianate Islamic society they ruled and the adoption of Persian bureaucratic systems, further cementing the distinct identity of this Khanate. However, the Ilkhanate also faced constant challenges from other Mongol Khanates, especially the Golden Horde, over border disputes and internal local revolts. It eventually collapsed and fragmented into smaller local dynasties in the mid-14th century, marking the end of direct Mongol rule in Persia.
Finally, in the vast plains of Central Asia lay the Chagatai Khanate. Governed by the descendants of Chagatai Khan, Genghis's second son, this Khanate often maintained a more traditional, nomadic Mongol identity, resisting complete assimilation into sedentary cultures to a greater extent than the Yuan or Ilkhanates. It was a region characterized by intense internal power struggles, constantly shifting borders and eventual fragmentation into numerous smaller emirates and ulus. This Khanate would, however, later serve as the crucial base for the rise of one of the last great Central Asian conquerors, Timur, Tamerlane, in the late 14th century. Timur, who claimed descent from Genghis Khan, though not directly from the main line, sought to revive and even surpass the Mongol conquests, creating his own vast, formidable empire. The broader Mongol decline was not a single sudden event, but a complex process driven by several interconnected factors. The most fundamental flaw was the inherent instability of the Ulus system, combined with the strong personalities of Genghis Khan's descendants. The constant internal divisions and civil wars, like the Toluid Civil War, over the position of Great Khan and persistent disputes over succession among the various branches of the Genghisid family prevented a unified response to external threats or internal crises. This perpetual infighting drained resources and undermined authority. The sheer scale of the empire also led to overextension and difficulty governing diverse, distant territories. Maintaining centralized control over such a vast and varied realm with different climates, cultures, and administrative needs proved to be an insurmountable challenge.
Communication, despite the YAM system, was still slow, and local provincial governors often wielded immense power. Furthermore, the Mongol elites in different khanates gradually underwent a process of assimilation into the conquered cultures. They adopted the languages, religions, and administrative practices of their more numerous and sophisticated subjects, e.g. Islam in Persia and the Golden Horde, Chinese customs in China. While this offered some stability and legitimacy, it also weakened their distinct Mongol identity and the political unity of the original empire, as each khanate developed its own unique character. Economically, the empire faced increasing strains and revolts, excessive taxation, currency issues like hyperinflation of paper money in China, and deep resentment of foreign rule led to widespread peasant uprisings and resistance movements across the empire. The very systems that initially brought prosperity began to buckle under the strain of over-centralization and corruption. Finally, and perhaps most devastatingly, the global impact of the Black Death, which emerged from Central Asia, potentially spread along the very Mongol trade routes that had once brought prosperity, in the mid-14th century decimated populations across Eurasia. The plague ravaged Europe, the Middle East, and critically also devastated the Mongol armies and populations themselves, profoundly weakening their military and administrative capabilities and contributing to social unrest and the ultimate decline of their political dominance across much of Eurasia, though their cultural and genetic legacy would endure for centuries more. The grand vision of a single universal empire had fractured, giving way to new dynasties and a reshaped world. And so the Mongol Empire, a single terrifying thunderclap that echoed across Eurasia, eventually fragmented into distinct khanates. Yet even as its political unity dissolved, its profound influence stretched across continents and centuries, forever altering the geopolitical map of the world. The legacy of Genghis Khan and his descendants wasn't merely etched in stone, it was woven into the very fabric of human history. The immediate and most visceral part of this legacy was, undeniably, terror. History records the brutal efficiency of Mongol conquests, leaving behind a chilling trail of systematic massacres and utter destruction. Imagine cities like Bukhara, Samarkand, and Merv, once glittering jewels of Islamic civilization, reduced to rubble.
Think of the infamous sack of Baghdad in 1258 AD, where the Abbasid Caliphate, a major cultural and intellectual center, fell to the Mongols, its libraries and monuments systematically destroyed. This wasn't just warfare, it was a deliberate strategy of psychological warfare.
The Mongols cultivated a reputation for overwhelming force and utter ruthlessness. News of their brutality often preceded them, causing entire cities and armies to surrender without a fight, simply paralyzed by fear. The scale of the death and devastation directly attributable to Mongol conquests is debated by historians, but estimates range into the tens of millions, creating demographic catastrophes for many regions that took centuries to recover, profoundly altering the genetic landscape of populations. The destruction of vast irrigation systems in Persia, for instance, had long-lasting ecological and agricultural consequences. Yet, paradoxically, out of this immense destruction arose a period of unprecedented transformation and connectivity, often referred to as the Mongol Exchange or the Pax Mongolica. Though brutally imposed, the Mongol peace inadvertently created the first true global village across Eurasia. They broke down physical and cultural barriers that had existed for millennia, connecting previously isolated civilizations on a scale never before imagined. The Mongols actively fostered and secured the ancient Silk Road, transforming it into an era of unparalleled safety and efficiency for long-distance trade. They ruthlessly suppressed bandits, removed numerous local tariffs and tolls that had previously stifled commerce, and provided imperial protection for merchants and travelers. Their ingenious Yam postal relay system, with its network of way stations and fresh horses, ensured rapid communication and safe travel for envoys, merchants, and scholars across their vast domain. This led to an unprecedented movement of goods, people, and, crucially, information and ideas across continents. This period facilitated a profound exchange of cultural and technological innovations. Imagine the transformative power of Chinese inventions flowing westward, profoundly impacting Europe's development and contributing to its eventual renaissance. Gunpowder, a Chinese invention, spread rapidly across the Mongol Empire to the Islamic world and then to Europe, forever revolutionizing warfare. Printing technology, including block printing and possibly precursors to movable type, also traveled west, transforming communication and knowledge dissemination, laying groundwork for the Gutenberg press. Paper money, another Chinese innovation, influenced early European banking systems, while the compass, essential for maritime exploration, also became more widely known in Europe. Advanced medical knowledge from China and the Middle East, including diagnostic techniques, pharmacology, and anatomical understanding, diffused across continents. From the Middle East, advancements in astronomy, mathematics, like Arabic numerals, algebra, trigonometry, engineering, and cartography flowed eastward into China and westward into Europe. Even agricultural techniques, new crops, like carrots, buckwheat and lemons, and culinary traditions spread across the continent, enriching diets and practices. Crucially, the Mongols, bound by Genghis Khan's Yasa, generally maintained a policy of remarkable religious tolerance. Unlike many empires, they did not seek to impose their own shamanistic beliefs on conquered peoples. This policy allowed diverse faiths, Buddhism, Nestorian Christianity, Islam, Confucianism, to flourish under Mongol rule. This tolerance, though pragmatic, fostered intellectual and spiritual exchange, attracting scholars and artisans of various backgrounds to the Mongol courts, creating a dynamic, diverse intellectual climate that stimulated new ideas. The Mongol conquests also led to significant demographic shifts. While devastating in some areas, the sheer scale of the conquests led to involuntary mass movements and relocation of populations. Skilled artisans, scholars, and engineers were often forcibly moved to various parts of the empire where their talents were needed, fostering new centers of production and cross-cultural interaction. Politically, the Mongol impact had far-reaching repercussions. In Europe, the constant threat of Mongol invasion indirectly stimulated the development of stronger, more centralized states and more efficient military organizations as a reaction to the formidable external challenge. The eventual rise of Moscow in Russia as a dominant power
was partly due to its role as a loyal tax collector for the Golden Horde, allowing it to consolidate power relative to other principalities. The foundation of later powerful empires that claimed direct or indirect lineage from the Mongols, such as the Mughal Empire in India, founded by Babur, a descendant of Timur and Genghis Khan, and the Ottoman Empire, which benefited from the disruption of older powers in Anatolia, also speaks to the enduring legacy of Mongol conquests and state-building. Genghis Khan himself remains a deeply complex and often contradictory figure, one of history's most fascinating and impactful personalities. He was, undeniably, a ruthless conqueror and destroyer, responsible for immense bloodshed and suffering. Yet, he was also a brilliant strategist, a revolutionary unifier, an innovator in law and administration, and a figure capable of inspiring unparalleled loyalty and devotion among his followers. His legacy in Mongolia today is overwhelmingly positive. He is revered as a national hero, the founding father of the Mongolian nation, a potent symbol of strength, independence, and national pride. His image adorns currency, public squares, and countless products. His perception in other parts of the world, however, varies dramatically, from a revered ancestor in some Turkic groups and his direct descendants, to a brutal, destructive conqueror in parts of China, the Islamic world, and Russia, highlighting the subjective nature of historical memory and national narratives.
The very end of Genghis Khan's life is shrouded in a captivating mystery, a testament to the power of his legacy and the secretive nature of Mongol traditions. He died in 1227 AD during his final campaign against the Western Xia. The exact circumstances of his death are unconfirmed by historical records, adding to his mystique. Various accounts suggest he died from injuries sustained after a fall from his horse during a hunt, or from an illness like typhoid fever common on campaigns, or even from a battle wound. His exact cause of death remains one of history's enduring enigmas. Even more mysterious is the location of his burial. Genghis Khan had reportedly expressed a wish to be buried without any markings or signs, in a secret, undisturbed location. The extreme secrecy surrounding his funeral became legendary. According to widespread Mongol tradition, the soldiers who escorted his body and attended his funeral procession killed anyone they encountered along the route, to keep the burial location absolutely secret. Furthermore, the land over his grave was reportedly trampled by thousands of horses, to obliterate any trace. And some legends even claim a river was diverted over the burial site, to make it utterly impossible to find. His unknown tomb remains one of history's greatest undiscovered secrets, defying centuries of searching by explorers and archaeologists. A testament to Mongol burial customs and his deliberate wish for an unmarked grave, allowing his spirit to roam freely and protect his nation. Modern archaeological efforts, using satellite imagery and geophysical surveys, have attempted to locate it, particularly near Burkhan Khaldun Mountain, his spiritual birthplace, but often face cultural respect, for Mongol wishes to leave him undisturbed. Perhaps the most astonishing and personal aspect of Genghis Khan's enduring legacy is his genetic footprint. A truly fascinating modern scientific discovery emerged from a 2003 genetic study that identified a widespread Y chromosome lineage, originating from approximately Genghis Khan's time and geographic region. The study found that about 0.5% of the world's male population today, an estimated 16 million men, carry this specific genetic marker. This means that approximately 1 in 200 men alive today can trace their direct paternal line back to Genghis Khan, or one of his close male relatives, sons, grandsons, whose descendants were also highly reproductively successful. This widespread lineage is attributed to the fact that Mongol leaders, particularly Genghis Khan and his direct descendants, famously had massive numbers of children from multiple wives and countless concubines, a practice of polygyny common among powerful steppe rulers. As the ruling elite of a vast empire, their powerful lineages would have had a significant survival and reproductive advantage over centuries.
leading to the wide dispersal of this genetic marker. This genetic footprint serves as a powerful, silent, and tangible testament to the sheer scale of his conquests and the enduring, profound impact of his dynasty on global demographics and human populations, a legacy literally encoded in our very DNA. So, what lessons can we draw from the whirlwind that was Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire? Genghis Khan himself was a revolutionary leader, whose qualities set him apart from typical tribal chiefs. He possessed a truly visionary approach that moved beyond mere tribalism to the audacious goal of nation-building and empire-building on an unprecedented scale. His iron will, forged in the crucible of unimaginable hardship and fueled by relentless determination, allowed him to achieve the impossible. His military genius, his mastery of strategy and logistics, his organizational skill, and his profound ability to inspire intense loyalty in his followers transformed nomadic warfare into a global phenomenon. His understanding of governance, from the Yasa legal code to the Yam postal system, showcased a pragmatic innovation. The Mongol Empire itself was a catalyst for global change, a paradox of immense destruction and unparalleled connection. It dramatically reshaped the political map of Eurasia, causing the rapid rise and fall of existing empires. Yet, by securing the Silk Road, it inadvertently fostered a period of profound intellectual, technological, and cultural exchange that directly influenced the European Renaissance and the Age of Exploration. The Mongols showed us the chilling effectiveness of psychology and terror as a military tool, the unparalleled effectiveness of discipline, speed, mobility, and adaptability in warfare, and the dangers of underestimating seemingly primitive nomadic peoples. They also highlighted the inherent challenges of sustaining a vast empire built on conquest, which inevitably leads to fragmentation and the assimilation of the conquerors by the conquered. The story of Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire is a reflection on the fragility and resilience of civilizations. It demonstrates how seemingly established, technologically superior, and wealthy empires could fall with astonishing speed to a disciplined, mobile, and innovative force. Yet, it also shows the resilience of cultures that, despite immense suffering, eventually absorbed Mongol influence, adapted, and reasserted their own identities, often in new, stronger forms. His enduring vision fundamentally altered the course of world history, creating connections and changes that continue to resonate centuries later.
It is a story for deep reflection on the ethical complexities of power and empire building, the devastating human cost of war versus the long-term, sometimes inadvertent benefits of interconnectedness. It reminds us that history is often shaped by paradoxes, by the profound impact of individuals, and by the relentless forces of change and adaptation. Genghis Khan's story continues to captivate because it reveals fundamental truths about human ambition, survival, the nature of leadership, and the profound, often unexpected ways that history unfolds. So, as the echoes of the Mongol thunder, of vast steppes, and of a man who changed the world settle gently in your mind, let this powerful narrative guide you into a deep, peaceful sleep. If the roar of the Mongol thunder has quieted your mind, and you'd like to explore more epic tales of history's most fascinating figures, consider subscribing and watching our next video, appearing on your screen now.